With apologies to the Railfans who were expecting a video about, I don't know, the DDZ, Inscription is a brilliant game and you should play it. The 12 people who watch my video on Resident Evil Village will tell you that I am not a gamer, and I am a huge coward. Why would I invest in an experience that I would just play through once, only to divert back to the 4 titles I play on which I've amassed close to, or sometimes exceeding 1,000 hours? One of my favourite games period, be it a physical game or a video game, is Uno. It's a simple card game that literally even babies can understand. So when I saw this simple roguelike card game doing the rounds on the internet, I was intrigued. I like card games, and I like games where the style plays a part in the actual gameplay. This is why games like West of Loathing, Splatoon and Team Fortress 2 are contenders for my favourite video games of all time. Well, I say contenders, but Splatoon secretly has already won that non-existent contest. Now look at Inscription. It's simple to understand and a very good time-waster game, and I don't get how someone with a lot more knowledge and experience surrounding video games can call it difficult to get into, the escapist. This game has a lot going for it, and even such things as progressing the game are totally optional. You want to keep playing the game like it appears in the trailers and the store page screenshots? That's fine, that's grand. The game does not punish you for doing so or become stale. It's a roguelike after all. Just know that you are missing out on a lot of content the game has to offer. It is virtually impossible to talk about this game without spoiling it, but seeing how the game came out in October last year and such big players as Moist Critical and Markiplier have already played it and finished it, I feel like I can just go through it all without a dedicated spoiler section. You boot up the game and the options like new game are just not functional. Your only option is to continue an existing run, foreshadowing things to come. You are greeted by this bloke who I'm going to refer to as the DM in this card-based Dungeons and Dragons-esque game he set up. The deck he hands you has a few cards, most of them of low cost with low stats. The cost of a card is displayed in the top right of the card, with 1 drop of blood meaning that you'll have to kill 1 creature on your board to play the new card. For this, the game handily provides you with 3 1 health 0 damage cards in the form of a side deck of squirrels. Their sole purpose in this game is to be sacrificed in order to play a higher powered card or to tank a hit. Damage done is displayed on this set of scales right here. Move it down 5 pegs to the right, thereby tipping the scale, and you win. If you do damage exceeding 5 pegs, you get to keep the additional damage in the form of currency. Equally, if the scale is tipped 5 pegs to the left by the DM's damage inflicted onto you, you lose. I said this game is very easy to pick up and play, but let me just put a slight asterisk behind that. The game sometimes does not want you to win. Very specific battles are designed for you to either spend all your items on them or die trying. Some battles suddenly put high damage cards on the table or straight up glitch in such a way that all the enemy cards turn into flight blocking bears with 4 damage and 6 health. When the game does this, I really don't like it, because it's clear that it's only doing this for the story purposes or to make the player more aggressive, when that's just not how you're supposed to play this game. You are rewarded for playing it out as long as possible in the form of the extra damage I mentioned before. So when the game wants you to be worse at playing it than you actually are, that's where the fun completely disappears for me. If one of these battles does happen and you manage to somehow survive, new items and new cards can be picked up along the way. This map of the area providing you with choices you can make, in doing so progressing your journey. You meet various characters along the way, most of them just being the DM in a different mask. The Trapper sells you pelts, but you always get one free. The Woodcarver can give you totems to give certain cards in your deck a power up. The Mycologist can fuse 2 identical cards, abilities not included, into 1 super powered card. The Bone Lord, who requires a permanent sacrifice to give you a free bone token. The Survivors, who can grant one of your cards a health or damage buff, but if you stick around for too long they'll kill your card. The Beast in the Cave, who will join your deck if you have a certain card combination in your deck. The Trader, who will give you cards for the pelts you brought from the Trapper. The Prospector, who plays some kind of find the lady game with you. Pick the right boulder and he'll grant you a gold pelt. And finally, the Sacrificial Stones, who will sacrifice a card of your choosing, but the ability of said card is transferred to another card in your deck. Then there are the boss battles. At the end of each map, a boss will challenge you, each boss having a different mechanic. The aforementioned Prospector is the map 1 boss. He has a mule which grants you extra cards if you kill it. He kills your cards on the board after his first phase and sends his hound after any cards you play after the fact. Good girl.
'Twas the Prospector!
The Angler is the map 2 boss, and he's, to be painfully honest, ridiculously easy. Every other turn he grabs one of your cards on the board and adds them to his own board. In his second phase he plants bait buckets in front of every one of your cards left on the board. You don't want to kill these buckets, just play a flying creature and you're fine. You beheld an immense man slouched beside a pond. He appeared to be tearing hunks of flesh from a fish corpse. Some chunks were thrown back into the pond, where a few ghoulish birds snapped them up, and some were sloppily pushed into the hulking man's mouth. I am the Angler. You are the fish. The Trapper and the Trader try to stop you at the end of map 3. One sets traps, killing your card should they attack, the other trades her own cards for pelt cards you might have in your hand. You took in the familiar sights and scents of the trapper's pelts, but something was different. The once friendly man now beheld you with a steely gaze.
I'm afraid I must be skinning you today.
The final boss of this act of the game is the DM himself, combining the most annoying abilities of the previous 4 bosses like the prick he is. In boss battles you only have one shot. If you die, it's game over, back to the start. Should you ever die, the DM takes you to his photo booth, where you inscribe a death card using the costs, stats and abilities from cards in your deck. Because you can inscribe your card with obscene stats and stacked abilities, these cards are the best ones in the entire game. Should you make it to the DM and you beat him, he takes you to his photo booth where he takes a picture of you, the screen fades to white and you're plonked back at the start of a new run. Interestingly, the same procedure is used to both punish you if you perish during a run and when you defeat the DM. And this never-ending loop of building a deck, stacking abilities, working your way to the DM or die trying is the most addicting and clever game loop I have seen in a long time from any game period. Keep in mind I don't really play games, so that's not saying much. The standard run has so many little things that I just really like. For instance, if you get up from the table, you can walk around the DM's cabin. If you snuff out one of the candles next to this drawer just once, nothing happens. But if you do it multiple times after getting up every once in a while, you get an upgrade to a card you only receive in boss battles. I did this by accident, and when I got this upgrade to the smoke, I thought this game was mine to toy with. Another thing I really like, though this one I had heard about and I hadn't figured it out myself, is that you can trick the survivors into eating a ringworm. Then, should you come across the camp again, they're all dead, allowing you to upgrade one card a total of 4 times. Even the DM remarks how it must have been something they ate that killed them. Should you decide to keep the ringworm, you can later on use a card that has a ring depicted in it to win a boon to aid you in the battle against the DM. Alas, these fun times in Death Card Cabin, yes that is what the cabin is called, are only roughly 30% of the game. There are 3 talking cards in the cabin, a stoat, a stinkbug and a stunted wolf. The stoat is in your hand from the very beginning, but the other 2 you have to find. When you gather all the talking cards, who all know each other but aren't really friends as remarked by the stoat, you'll have to beat the DM one final time. But before he can take a picture of you, you snatch his camera and you take a picture of him instead, turning him into a card. You realize that the DM has been keeping the new game option locked away in his cabin, and should you press it, the game virtually restarts. And now, Inscription as it was meant to be boots up. You see, Inscription used to be a 2D pixel art style deck building game, but the DM, whose name is revealed to be Leshy, took control of the game. A side note, in many Slavic languages, Leshy means the one from the forest. Leshy was one of an order of 4 scribes who created cards to, I don't know, take over the world, I guess. Leshy is the scribe of beasts, and he creates cards by taking photos of wildlife, thusly capturing the essence of said wildlife in a card. This is what he did to the other 3 scribes, turning them into the talking cards. This stage of the game is my least favourite because it mostly serves as exposition dump. The characters talk about some old evil known only as the old data, some pretentious bull about a government cover-up or something. I really don't care. It's trying to set up an ARG because developers still think people care. I don't get it. Why do people still bother with alternate reality games? The rewards are seemingly required by law to be utterly disappointing. What I also don't get is why people actually like the scribes as characters.
Yep, I'm PO3, okay? You picked my starter deck. That means you have to learn to use energy. Do I really have to explain this to you? At the start of each turn, you increase your max energy. Spend it or not, doesn't matter. At the start of your turn, your energy refills to the max. Get it? See that? You spend your energy to play the card, but you get it back next turn. Sick of hearing from me? Well, I'm sick of talking. I've got important work to do. You'll see me later.
It's pretty obvious they are all terrible, cruel people, and I'm not invested in them beyond their role in the actual card game you are supposed to play. Ironically, the total opposite of the Lords in Resident Evil Village, where I couldn't get enough of them.
Lady, supersize.
Magnificus, the scribe of magic, really seems to enjoy torturing his wizard pupils. Grimora, the scribe of the dead, wants to bring the world of Inscription to an end. Leshy wants to treat the world of Inscription as his own plaything, capturing the inhabitants into beast cards. And Pio3, the scribe of technology, plans to take over the world of the game to suit his own goals. If you manage to beat all 4 scribes in this 2D section of the game, the scribe of technology actually shows up again, challenges you to one more battle, and in doing so breaks the game, allowing him to take control of the game of Inscription, not unlike Leshy presumably did it. Pio3 is your DM now, and he really does not care for the job. He guides you through completing the new map, which is just a 2D map made with 3D holographic assets, expects you to win, and that's all he's here for. Pio3, being a machine, his tech cards mechanic is a power cell. You don't sacrifice cards to play them, you pay for them with power cells. Each turn adds 1 cell to your counter to a total of 6. You can only play a card if you have enough energy to play that card, but your energy depletes accordingly. I like this because unlike Leshy's game, which sometimes turned into total desperation flinging stuff at the board hoping it doesn't kill you, the Scribe of Technology allows you to plan for your game in the long term, and I really like that mechanic. I like playing the long game because it allows me to get the most out of the cards I have, and I'm not really reliant on what the DM deals me at the beginning of the round. On the subject of tech cards, I am not sure how one pronounces the name of the Scribe of Technology. It's spelled P-O-3, but there's a lot of leet speak, or numbers that represent letters, in the name of his cards. 1s are I's, 5s are S's, 3s are E's, that sort of thing. Does this mean you pronounce his name as P-O-3, or as Poe? You know what, just for the sake of annoying you, I'm doing both. Like Death Card Cabin, you get up from the table and walk around Pio3's factory. There are some secrets to find and puzzles to solve, though they are either, again, playing that dumb ARG card being vague for the sake of it, or they are just sort of interesting enough for me to look for clues. That, and I'm stupid, so there's some major sour grapage going on about me not being able to find said clues. Something I've neglected to mention up until this point is that the creator of Inscription, the actual video game itself, not the world inside of the video game, Daniel Mullins, is also the creator of another game that went viral very briefly. Pony Island. I don't like Pony Island. It's a barely 2-hour game about a game being stuck inside of another game, yet somehow it still manages to show its hand of bullshittery too early. Inscription plays the same notes in the basic story structure of an asset in the game taking it over, but allows the asset itself, Poe in this case, to toy with you rather than the other way around. Getting back to the technology chapter, whilst the normal battles are mostly of the same structure as the ones with Leshy, minus the deliberately wanting you to fail, the boss battles is where Inscription gets the most interesting. The photographer takes pictures of the board between turns, allowing you to effectively revert the state of the board to what it was in when the photograph was taken. The Archivist is many people's favourite. She requires you to look through your actual PC to use files as weights on the scale. The bigger and older the file, the more damage it is worth. There are some real stakes in this battle, because should you lose, the game deletes those files. Pio3 even snaps out of his archivist persona to tell you that he's not joking, he will do it. You see, dear viewer, I am an animator, so my PC is littered with old animation files of videos that you will never get to see. Just smacking down some old failed train animations make me breathe through this battle like it was nothing. And then there is another fan favourite boss battle, Golly. She connects the game to the internet, and in doing so she has access to actual pictures of the creatures on the cards. She also allows the player to make a card and send that card to any other player currently playing her boss battle. Unfortunately, I finished her battle on Christmas Day, so I never had the pleasure of knowing someone got the card I created. Nevertheless, the most interesting thing Golly can do is... The game inscribes some of your Steam friends into cards, most of them being pretty powerful cards. Words cannot describe how much I love that. Then there is the... And finally, there is the canvas. This boss battle you have to create yourself. Create a phase, 2 mechanics, and you're good to go. If you complete the 4 bosses, Poe reveals his ultimate plan. You prepared the game, Inscription the video game, for being sold to the masses. You finished the game, took screenshots for the store page, and even allowed Pio3 to connect it to the internet. But right before completing the upload, Leshy tears off the android's head. The scribes arrive, and Magnificus gives the player the new game option in order to reset the game back to the 2D game it was always meant to be. But even before the player has the chance to do that, Grimora straight up deletes the game, set on ending the endless quarrel between the scribes, taking the old data with it, briefly referred to earlier. As the deletion process takes place, the scribes each have their final moment with you before their ultimate demise. Grimora reminisces over what could have been, accepting the void while still trying to play her version of the card game with you. This also leads to my favourite moment in the game. That's hilarious, come on now. Leshy regretfully accepts his demise, just wishing to play a final round with you. This turns him into the most humane character in the game, as far as a person willing to capture the inhabitants of his world into paper cards can be called humane. He reminisces about the actual card game you played with him, remarking how your deck is a good one and your cards have truly bested his. Even when the skills are deleted, he just wants to play for fun. He just wants to play the game how, in his eyes, it was always meant to be played. He calls it good game, and with that, the scribe of beasts is no more. Magnificus resists his deletion, but knows it is futile. He knows he will not survive. He resists even though he knows what is coming, as he has foreseen it. Even with that knowledge, he still puts up a fight. But unlike the other scribes, the scribe of magic does not get the closure he wants. He never gets to shake your hand. That's the story of Inscription, or at least my experience with it. It is a wonderful, endearing game that knows what you're expecting from it, and it either plays along or toys with you. Even if, after building your deck and coming up with a brilliant strategy, even if you fail after all that, the game still compels you to pick it up and try again. Inscription is not afraid to pull you down a peg when the game feels that you're doing just a little too well, which in my eyes slightly spoils the fun. The game can sometimes feel like it wants you to be worse than you actually are. The most fun I can have in this game is when I ignore all the talking cards in Death Card Cabin and I just power up my runs with more lives and the better side deck. The Leshy loop, over and over again, seems to be the preferred way of a lot of players to play Inscription, and I am one of those people. However, that is not where my experience with Inscription ends, because Daniel Mullins listened. On December the 14th, Casey's mod was added to the game. This is an open beta for a new mode, allowing players to do the very thing they unanimously love: Death Card Cabin on loop. Your run always has a set of challenges for you to pick, effectively gimping your run more and more every time you complete the cabin. Some new cards are added, among them being the Cuckoo, the Wild Bull, and the Dire Wolf. The Cuckoo plays a broken egg on the space directly opposing it should it be empty, and because the egg does not do any damage and the Cuckoo is a flying card, it effectively gets 1 free damage on Leshy every time it is played before an empty space. You can also use it to hold back a very powerful card. Sometimes the egg survives its fall from the nest the Cuckoo emptied and then turns into a Raven egg, in my opinion one of the most powerful cards in the game. But if you were to upgrade the Cuckoo to 1 extra point of damage, it is basically a better Raven. The Wild Bull has the same stats as the Wolf, but moves spaces, vaulting other cards over its back should they block its path. Sometimes, like when there's a tree stump in the way, this is useful, but to me, I prefer the boring old Wolf. The Dire Wolf only does 2 damage, but it strikes twice for a total of 4. If Leshy was to play a card with 2 health and you put a Dire Wolf to oppose it, it would kill the opposing card with its 2 damage first and then inflict the other 2 damage onto Leshy. Casey's mod also introduces perhaps my favourite map location, Goobert's Easel. Goobert is one of Magnificus's graduate students who was turned into goo because Magnificus is a prick. Like his master, Goobert paints cards using one from your deck as reference. Sometimes the cards will be identical, sometimes the sets will be slightly different, and some additional sigils can also be changed. You have no control over this. Goobert wants to help you, but simply makes mistakes sometimes. He is also Daniel Mullins' favourite character, according to the wiki. But in Casey's mod, Inscription's nastiest trait is its biggest flaw. You'd expect that in a challenge mode, your skill at the game would be the prime factor in the run ending in either failure or triumph. But in the mod, Inscription still throws those unwinnable battles your way, both amplifying the things that made Act 1 so fun, but also exacerbating what made it terrible. As of writing this script, I have completed 5 successful runs through Casey's mod, and I am not too pleased with these clever tricks the game has up its sleeveless shirt. I know this entire section of the video maybe just serves to expose how bad I am at the game, and I would love for that to be the definite case, because that means that the flaws are mine to deal with and not the game itself. I want to fully 100% love Inscription, but as this apparently is one of the core mechanics painfully highlighted in a mode where death is punished and not encouraged or at least compensated for like in the main game, I simply cannot truly love this game. People like to dump on Act 3 or PO3 section because Poe doesn't have the same charm or the same refinement as Leshy's Act 1, but I for one like the snarky android. If I could suggest an unrealistic feature for the game, it would be a true endless mode of Act 1 and 3. Fewer challenges, no reset on the first 4 bosses, and just a true endless loop. That's not to say I don't like the game as it is, I do. I've been playing it basically every day since I got it in late December. But to say I am on board with the things that the game tries to do would be lying. If I was to rate this game, it would be an 8 out of 10. The 2 marks taken away from it would be just because of the unwinnable battles. I still urge you to try this game out. There's a demo available on Steam, so if it's really not your thing, it wouldn't have cost you a dime. Final thing I want to touch on before ending this video is the music. Throughout this video I've been using music from the original soundtrack. I know the phrase is overused and practically devoid of all meaning, but Inscription's soundtrack has no right to slap as hard as it does. Composer Jonas Senzel has done an excellent job creating a playlist with a lot of range, my favourites being The Angler, The Trapper, the Angler's motif in Leshy's theme, which was rightfully used in the trailer for the game, and Uberbot Activated. The original soundtrack is also available on Steam. It's only a few quid and it's perfect for D&D sessions, speaking of someone who will never touch D&D with a shunter's pole. Then again, I also said I'm not a gamer, yet here we are.